Elias Rourke didn't even get 3 steps into the lecture hall before someone laughed at the case he was carrying. It wasn't the usual kind of laugh, either not the surprised kind, or the polite chuckle of interspecies curiosity. No, this was full-throated, chest-rattling derision from a Vortari cadet across the room, arms folded, voice echoing off polished alloy walls. "Is that a ballistic weapon? You brought kinetics to a weapons theory class?" The alien hooted, glancing sideways at his companions. "Oh, stars, tell me, that's a museum piece." Elias didn't answer. He just set the case down quietly at his assigned station second row, left quadrant, flipped the latches, and opened it. Inside, laid out in tight foam cutouts, was an old M4 carbine. Nothing fancy, no lasers, no AI, just steel, polymer, and about 3 pounds of good intentions. The silence that followed wasn't respectful. It was the kind that filled a vacuum after everyone collectively agreed you'd just embarrassed your entire species. Instructor Yal'Veen, a luminous being of angular crystal facets, cleared its throat, or simulated one. "Let us begin," it said dryly, gliding to the front. Today's session, failures of obsolete weapons systems and their role in cultural myth-making. Elias didn't flinch. He just locked eyes with the Vortari, who was still smirking. He didn't need to say anything. They'd asked for a demonstration later in the week. He'd just moved it up to today. The Zarnathi Interstellar Peacekeeping Academy wasn't exactly known for subtlety. Everything gleamed. From the plasma-lit hallway floors to the orbital defense drone pods, the place reeked of ceremonial excess and interstellar pride. 82 species trained here, and all of them brought their flashiest, most intimidating weaponry. Ionic spears that could tear tanks apart, particle blades sharp enough to shave neutronium, and antimatter flechettes so unstable they were transported in individual stasis bubbles. Elias, staff sergeant in the Earth Expeditionary Corps and veteran of the Ganymede raids, brought a 7.62 cleaning rod and a toothbrush. To his left, a towering insectoid cadet from the Zarnathi combine leaned forward to inspect his gear. "Your weapon is mechanical?" she asked, a dozen black eyes blinking in sync. "It's gas-operated," Elias replied. "Direct impingement. Been in service since the early 2000s. Variants are still standard issue." "Fascinating," she said politely, though her facial plates twitched with confusion. The Vortari cadet from earlier wasn't done. He stepped forward, slinging a rifle made entirely of floating segments that pulsed with blue energy. His armor looked like it cost more than a frigate. "Grixxel of House Vorn," he said grandly. "Arms engineer, 5th cycle sharpshooter, and currently completing my advanced instructorship certification. Tell me, Elias Rourke of Earth, how many quantum locks does your rifle utilize?" "None," Elias said. Grixxel paused. "Does it self-correct for gravitational drift at distance?" "Nope." "AI stabilized targeting suite?" "I got these," Elias said, tapping under each eye. 20/10ths vision." The classroom snickered. Grixxel chuckled like a performer who just nailed the punchline. "And what is it you do when your magazine depletes?" "I change it," Elias said. More laughter. Yal'Veen raised a crystal limb for silence. "Cadets, today's mock combat scenario will involve target suppression in a volatile atmosphere. Each of you will deploy your personal sidearms under limited visibility, low grav, and electromagnetic interference. If your weapon cannot function within these parameters, you may wish to reconsider your career path." Yal'Veen's tone was neutral, but Elias caught the brief glance the instructor gave him. A small flicker passed through the crystal's facets. Amusement, maybe, pity, more likely. 30 minutes later, the class descended into the Academy's sub-environment testing dome. The air inside was thick with polymer fog and reeked of synthetic ozone. Visibility dropped to 5 meters. The floor had variable traction. A low magnetic hum permeated everything. Environmental conditions now simulating Delta Combat Class. Humid planetfall with ion disturbance. The automated voice boomed from overhead. Targets active in 10 seconds. Cadets scattered to their lanes. Grixxel performed a flourish as his rifle assembled itself with an audible hum. He tapped a few pads on his wrist, activating his visual targeting HUD. Elias pulled the charging handle on his M4, checked the chamber, and muttered, "All right, girl, show 'em what you've got." Targets popped up, silhouettes, moving erratically through the mist. Grixxel's first shots were loud, flashy, each pulse accompanied by a burst of light and cascading rings of energy. He nailed the first 2 targets, missed the third, then fired again. His weapon glitched, a whining sound, a sudden error icon flashing in the air beside him. Overheat condition, the HUD said. Cooldown cycle initiated. Grixxel cursed in Vortari. Elias squeezed his trigger. The M4 barked once, flat and mechanical. He shifted position, rotated to a knee, sighted again. Bark, bark, bark. 3 targets down. He moved sideways across the uneven terrain. The magnetic pulse made Grixxel's aim jitter. The fog dampened visual assistance. Elias kept shooting. Short bursts, controlled. He hit 9 out of 10 targets within 40 seconds. Someone near the back clapped. "Enough," Yal'Veen said. "Cadet Rourke, remain in place." The fog cleared. Everyone looked. Elias was crouched, rifle smoking slightly, half submerged in a shallow pool of oily coolant used to simulate battlefield contamination. Yal'Veen floated closer. "Was submersion part of your plan?" "Had to cross the floor. No time to detour," Elias said, slinging the rifle and popping the mag. He cleared the chamber, locked the bolt back, and reloaded cleanly. "Still runs." "No recalibration?" "No need." Another cadet raised a hand. "Could I try it?" Grixxel interrupted. "This test doesn't prove anything. It's a statistical outlier." He turned to Yal'Veen. "Let me run a comparative trial with another cadet, using a photon slicer under identical parameters." Yal'Veen turned, light refracting along its edges. "We will, in due course. For now, we are revising the order of lectures. Cadet Rourke, would you provide a full breakdown of your weapon system?" The silence returned. This time, nobody laughed. Back in the lecture chamber, Elias stood before a group of aliens who, if not impressed, were at least listening. "This," he said, holding up the carbine, "is an M4, gas-operated, rotating bolt, no computer targeting, no autonomous anything. Your AI dies, this keeps going. Your energy core ruptures, this still shoots. Burn it, bury it, drop it in sand, it's seen worse." He pulled the rifle apart in seconds. Bolt carrier, charging handle, buffer spring, lower and upper receivers. Every part field repairable. If you've got a multi-tool, a sock, and a bad attitude, you can clean and service it in a ditch. Someone raised a limb. "How long does it take to train someone to use this?" "We can teach basic handling in a week, combat ready in a month, if they're halfway bright." Grixxel folded his arms. "Your tactics rely on numbers, then. Disposable troops with mass-issued gear." "No," Elias said, locking the upper and lower receivers back together. "They rely on the fact that this doesn't lie. If it's jammed, it tells you. If it's empty, it clicks. It's a tool, not a partner. No secrets, no overrides." He picked up the underbarrel launcher attachment, locked it in place with a practiced click. "This is a 40mm grenade launcher. Old model. Lobs a high explosive round over obstacles. Not precise, but good enough." He gestured to the reinforced blast shield at the back of the room. "Want me to show you?" Yal'Veen hesitated, then gave a single nod. Elias sighted in, adjusted for drop, and fired. The round wumped out with a heavy thunk, arcing in a slow, lazy curve. It landed with a deep concussive boom. The blast shield cracked. The dummy behind it was gone. Grixxel stared, face unreadable. Elias slung the weapon again. "Reliable, cheap, doesn't need a PhD to fix. Some of our units still carry models that served in the jungles of Brazil during the resource wars. You tell me how many of your rifles last that long." The room sat in silence for a beat. Then cadets began murmuring. A few drifted forward. One reached out to touch the handguard. Grixxel didn't speak, not yet. But Elias saw his eyes tracking the rifle like it was made of gold. The following morning, Elias was in the armory, seated cross-legged on a cold alloy bench, brushing carbon residue from the M4's bolt carrier with a rag and some solvent. The rifle had fired clean the day before, but old habits stuck harder than Zarnathi epoxy. He didn't hear the door open, but he felt the shift in air pressure behind him. Someone large, armored, and full of second thoughts. Something I can help you with? Elias asked without looking up. I want to see it again, Grixxel said. Elias looked over his shoulder. The Vortari stood stiffly, posture militarily correct, hands empty but fidgeting with invisible tension. I thought you said it was a museum piece, Elias said, dabbing the rag into the upper receiver. Grixxel stepped forward, gaze fixed on the carbine like it might blink. That demonstration, under those conditions, your weapon functioned beyond my projections. Your targeting wasn't enhanced, your system was purely mechanical, and yet the outcome defies tactical expectations. Elias chuckled softly. Funny how reality doesn't always align with projections. Grixxel grunted. I request a closer inspection, not out of admiration, for analysis. Elias rotated the rifle and held it out, stock first. The alien took it carefully, as if it might detonate. He examined the sights, the worn buffer tube, the scuff marks along the Picatinny rail, his face twisted in confusion at the simplicity. No magnetic coupling, no smart metal, just metal and oil and intention. This is deliberately inefficient, he muttered. It's deliberately unbreakable, Elias corrected. There's a difference. Grixxel crouched beside him, the heavy plates of his armor clicking together as he settled. You realize your weapon violates every principle of current design. It is loud, lacks autonomous compensation, and exposes the user to recoil strain. Recoil is manageable, Elias said, and sound can be suppressed. You'd be amazed what a trained user can adapt to when the gun doesn't melt halfway through a fight. Grixxel paused, then handed it back. There is value in failure modes being predictable. That is not something we designed for. Our systems either operate at 100% or not at all. Yeah, well, Earth's got a long history with things working at 30%. We make do. That afternoon, during tactical applications, Instructor Yal'Veen had a new lesson plan. Today's exercise is urban suppression, the crystalline instructor announced as the class assembled in the simulation chamber Delta. You will be placed into a controlled replica of mid-tier planetary infrastructure zones, complete with interference from structural materials and local signal dampening. Each cadet will attempt suppression of hostile drone units, using your preferred sidearm. The room changed. Holographics activated. The space transformed into a crumbling cityscape, all sharp corners and smoke-filled alleyways. Crates, cover, and drone targets began deploying in random patterns. Elias checked his sling, flipped his selector switch, and stepped into the zone. This time, he wasn't alone. A slender, orange-scaled alien cadet named Frishka from the Aliari Commonwealth approached him with open curiosity. I saw your performance yesterday, she said. I would like to observe your tactics, if permitted. Sure, Elias said. Stick close. Don't get in front of the muzzle. She blinked slowly, then nodded, looking only mildly concerned at that last part. Yal'Veen's voice came through the intercom above. Cadet Rourke, you will proceed first. Begin when ready. Elias took a knee behind a crumbled support pillar. The fog here was chemical, not real, but loaded with density and light scattering to interfere with optics. He sighted the first drone as it hovered near a ledge, hesitated half a second for drift, and squeezed. The rifle cracked once. The drone sparked, spun, and fell. Frishka flinched. That sound, it's explosive. Controlled combustion, Elias said. Kinda our thing. He moved quickly through the field, switching between semi-auto and short bursts. When cover was sparse, he laid suppressive fire at angles that forced the drones into predictable routes. With each step, Frishka followed and whispered questions. How do you account for ammo depletion? Count your shots. You don't need a HUD to know you fired 30 rounds. What if you lose count? Reload anyway, better safe than sorry. And what if the weapon jams? Tap, rack, reassess. She stared, perplexed. Your responses are minimalist. They're meant to be done while people are shooting at you, less thinking, more surviving. The simulation ended with the metallic clink of the last drone crashing into a bin of empty ration crates. Trial complete, Yal'Veen announced. Hit ratio, 89%. Weapon failure, 0. Cooldown required, none. The rest of the class took turns, many struggling with signal interference. Frishka attempted her trial next, and though her sidearm and elegant, wrist-mounted plasma thrower worked beautifully at first, It lost calibration after 6 targets. She finished using a backup coil knife. Elias stood with Grixxel watching. "These simulations, they're too clean," Elias said. "We trained in real mud, real bullets. You don't understand a weapon until you have to trust it after crawling through 6 miles of soaked dirt with no backup." Grixxel said nothing. He stared at Elias's M4 again. His arms were folded, but the condescension was gone. That evening, Elias was heading to the Academy's med center, not for an injury, but for his required monthly check-in. All interspecies cadets were evaluated for immune adaptation and neural strain due to linguistic overlays. Earth-issued translation chips had a bad habit of desyncing under stress. Vitals normal, no cognitive lag. Hydration, borderline, you're not drinking enough. The medic, a squat, fur-covered, biped with 3 fingers per hand, grumbled while scanning Elias's spine with a narrow wand. "I'm trying to get used to the water here. Tastes like radiator fluid," Elias replied. "Because it is distilled through a radiator," the medic said without sarcasm. "Now hold still. I need to verify your shoulder's joint integrity." Elias winced as the wand pressed against old scar tissue. "You've been shot before?" the medic asked. "Twice," Elias said. "Left deltoid and through the thigh. Years back." "Projectile?" "Yeah, from one of these." He pointed to the M4 still slung over his chair nearby. The medic looked from the weapon to Elias. "I'm amazed your people still carry those." "Because when you're down to one hand and bleeding out, those still fire," Elias muttered. The medic didn't argue. The next morning's lecture hall was quieter. Less laughter, more side glances. Elias sat at his usual spot, cleaning a magazine spring. A pair of cadets came closer, not mockingly. Curious. Frischka returned too, this time with a notepad. She tapped it. "I have drawn up a theoretical logistics plan for equipping planetary militias with Earth firearms. Could I ask questions later?" "Sure," Elias said. Grixxel entered late. No bravado, no entourage. He walked straight to Elias's station and sat down. After a pause, he said, "You claim this weapon has lineage, service history. Prove it." Elias opened a side pouch on his pack and retrieved a folded photo. He laid it flat. The photo was sun-bleached, laminated. It showed a soldier in dusty fatigues, face smeared with dirt, holding the same M4. "My grandfather, Firebase Charlie, Helmand Province. 2091. "This is the same rifle?" Grixxel asked. "Mostly. Parts have been swapped, barrels newer, but the lower receiver's original. Fire selector has a groove I filed myself." The Vortari arms dealer stared, saying nothing. Instructor Yal'Veen entered. Today's topic was supposed to be modular quantum loadouts, but after a brief moment, it turned to Elias. "Cadet Rourke," Yal'Veen said, "tomorrow you will lead a field seminar on low-tech reliability in high-tech warfare. Prepare material, diagrams optional, demonstrations preferred." Elias nodded. "Yes, instructor." Cadets murmured again. But it wasn't doubt this time. It was anticipation. The field seminar began just after the second sun crested the ridgeline, throwing molten orange light over the Academy's southern impact range. It was already hot. Dry wind rolled over the scrub-dotted terrain, carrying a gritty bite that lodged itself in vents and filters. Most cadets wore sealed suits or heat-shielded armor. Elias wore a plain field uniform, sleeves rolled, skin baking slowly in the thin air. He had one bottle of water, an M4 over his shoulder, and a battered hard case filled with demonstration gear. The crowd was larger than expected. Over 40 cadets had signed up for the elective session, triple what Instructor Yal'Veen had anticipated. Even the non-combat focused species showed up, clustering behind blast shields or shaded drone canopies. Elias spotted Frischka up front with a stylus in one hand and 2 different ballistic protection masks in the other, deciding which to wear. Grixxel stood alone near a crate, arms folded, but he wasn't sneering anymore. Instructor Yal'Veen hovered a few meters back, passive as ever, but emitting a light pulse pattern Elias now recognized as quiet interest. He didn't speak right away. He let the quiet settle. Then he stepped forward and placed the rifle on the crate. "This is what I was issued in 2142, he began, his voice steady but firm. "I've carried variations of it through Mars Recon, the Ganymede hostage retake, and a 15-day siege on a mining colony where the food ran out before the ammo did. He popped open the upper and lower receivers. This thing doesn't need an AI to aim, it doesn't use plasma, it can't slice through neutronium plating or disable ships. But when your exopack breaks, when your HUD cracks, when you're breathing recycled dust through a hole in your helmet, it'll still fire. He held up the bolt carrier group. This right here? You can clean it with motor oil and a toothbrush. Doesn't need a nanoforge. If a spring breaks, you pull one from a pen. There were murmurs again, different this time. Scribbling, recording devices, whirring silently. Elias knelt and set a dummy target downrange, roughly humanoid, armored and equipped with reactive shielding. He took a small data spike from his pocket and slotted it into the dummy's control port. Shield settings match those found on mid-tier mercenary units from the Theta Belt. Kinetic absorption field, standard grade. Not hardened for high-speed impacts, just energy. He stood, shouldered the rifle, and fired. The first 3 rounds pinged off the shielding. The 4th punched through. Then the 5th. By the 6th, the shield flickered. Elias changed mags without looking, fired 5 more. The dummy slumped. They don't expect you to hit them fast enough. That's the point. Shield cycling can't keep up with consistent kinetic strikes unless you're throwing real mass at them. And a 5.56 NATO round at 3,000 feet per second is real enough. Frischka raised a hand. Isn't that wasteful, though? Using so much ammunition? Sure, Elias said. But wasteful and effective ain't mutually exclusive. Also why I'm going to show you the other part of the equation. He pulled out a simple polymer tube from the case, unfolded, legs snapped out, and a stock locked into place. Meet the M203, grenade launcher, underbarrel, attachable or standalone, shoots 40mm grenades, no guidance system, no smart charge, just iron sights and elbow grease. He loaded a smoke round first, fired it at a flank position near the ridge, the area filled with dense white plumes. Cover. Next, a HE round. This time, the blast knocked over the drone dummy behind a shield. Disruption. Then, he loaded a tear gas round. A few aliens started adjusting their filtration masks instinctively. Crowd control. Grixxel finally stepped forward. These are low yield, not effective against heavy infantry. Correct, Elias said. That's why you carry the launcher for options, not for raw firepower. He pulled out another device, a small plastic casing with 4 fins and a stabilizer. Now this is a programmable airburst. It's not made on Earth. It's Vortari tech adapted to NATO platforms. Dual use. 1 weapon, 2 schools of thought. It'll explode 2 meters above target. He fired the round, which whistled for a split second before detonating midair above a trench target. The pressure wave hit with a muted whump, flattening the training barricade. Grixxel said nothing, but Elias caught the brief flick of one of the Vortari's 3 outer digits, a sign of restrained surprise, according to his briefing packet. Yal'Veen moved forward. Cadet Rourke. The class has prepared comparative units for testing. Would you be willing to allow cross-platform trials? Elias nodded. Gladly. The rest of the day turned into a weapons lab. Cadets rotated through the range, testing their energy rifles under adverse conditions. Dense fog, EM distortion, heat glare, and simulated mud. One cadet's plasma carbine jammed after 2 volleys in the simulated sand. The internal coolant lines clogged. Another's auto-aim feature failed when magnetic interference warped the targeting data. Shots flew wild. Elias loaned the M4 to Frischka, who had watched the cleaning procedure closely. Her grip was awkward at first, but her posture improved with each burst. Her shot grouping was scattered but consistent. She handed it back with eyes wide. This doesn't feel like a weapon, she said. It feels like a hammer, like something you just use. Exactly, Elias said. Even Grixxel took a turn, under the guise of evaluating recoil impact across species. He braced, took 3 shots, and paused. I assumed the recoil would be destabilizing, he said. But it is rhythmic. It's got character, Elias said. You mean imbalance? No, Elias said with a half smile. I mean it lets you know what it's doing. No surprises. If you're listening, it tells you everything. As the sun began to dip behind the ridgeline, casting long shadows across the field, Yal'Veen reassembled the cadets for a formal debrief. Today's results challenge the operational supremacy of energy weapons under all conditions, the instructor said. While projectile-based platforms possess limitations, particularly in ammunition, constraints, and logistical burden, their predictability, mechanical resilience, and ease of field maintenance mark them as viable alternatives in environments hostile to energy dispersion. Several cadets nodded. Frischka raised her hand. Will projectile training become mandatory in multi-environment survival coursework? Yal'Veen shimmered slightly. A proposal has been submitted to the Tactical Integration Board. Elias tried not to let that show on his face, but a corner of his mouth twitched. As the cadets dispersed, Grixxel remained. He stood near the crate where Elias was repacking the rifle. I do not retract my opinion that your weapons are primitive, Grixxel said. Didn't ask you to, Elias replied. But, Grixxel added, they are also disturbingly effective. Elias looked up. Funny how that works. Do you have schematics? Elias paused. You asking for official records or a tutoring session? Grixxel hesitated. Both. Tomorrow, Elias said. 8. Back here. Bring a multi-tool. And don't wear anything you can't get gun grease on. Grixxel dipped his head slightly. It wasn't quite a bow, but for a Vortari, it was close. As he walked off, Elias looked down at the rifle on the table. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a story still being told. And for the first time in this glittering, high-tech academy of future warfighters, it had found a room full of readers. The next morning arrived without fanfare. No announcements, no bright banners or official orders. Just the same pale Zarnathi dawn light pouring through the translucent walls of the Academy's South Armory Annex, where Elias sat at a workbench under a hanging halogen strip. The faint clink of metal parts echoed through the mostly empty space. He was halfway through reassembling the carbine after giving the firing pin channel a proper scrub when the door opened. Grixxel entered, holding a datapad under one arm and a shockingly clean multi-tool in the other. I've read through the basic schematics, the Vortari said. There are less than 20 moving parts. It's almost insulting. Elias didn't look up. Then this'll be over quick. Grixxel moved beside him, still standing. He seemed uncomfortable without his usual crowd of admirers, maybe more uncomfortable standing beside something he had spent weeks ridiculing. Elias pushed the stripped lower receiver toward him. Show me how you'd clean the trigger group. Grixxel crouched awkwardly, using the edge of the multi-tool to poke at the components with delicate precision. That's not how it's done, Elias said, watching him. You're not assembling a quantum scanner. Get in there. It's not going to fall apart unless you use a hammer. Grixxel gave a quiet grunt of annoyance, then finally slid the tool in properly and began brushing out the soot. Let me guess, Elias said. You never had to clean a weapon yourself before. My systems self-maintain. Or, I issue it to a technician. Thought so. Elias leaned back. You don't really understand a weapon until you've taken it apart in the dark with blood on your hands and shaking fingers. It's not about complexity. It's about what still works after the fancy stuff fails. Grixxel didn't reply, but his movements slowed, became more deliberate, less clinical. They worked in silence for another 20 minutes. Elias walked him through the bolt assembly, the buffer spring, how to check gas rings by tension. This entire cycle, it's analog, Grixxel said finally. There is no sensor suite, no closed-loop logic. Everything is user input. And yet, Elias said, when you were under fire yesterday, it still worked. A pause. Then a quiet, yes. He wasn't smug about it, and Elias didn't smile. This wasn't about winning, it was about understanding. 2 days later, the Academy hosted its semi-annual cross-species squad simulation, a 5-hour endurance mission designed to test coordination, survival skills, and combat adaptability. 12 mixed squad teams were dropped into an artificial terrain modeled after a Tier 6 conflict zone, uneven elevation, variable weather, and simulated hostiles with randomly shifting tactics. Elias wasn't supposed to participate. He'd been invited to observe. But when Cadet Helren from the Jari Biomex dislocated his shoulder during gear prep, Instructor Yal'Veen pulled Elias aside. Cadet Grixxel has requested you be assigned to Squad 4 as temporary field support, the instructor said. Given recent developments, your presence is advisable. Elias strapped his kit back on without comment. The rifle sat firm across his back. The grenade launcher was tucked in a soft sling on his left side. He ran a quick function check and loaded up. Squad 4 hit dirt under a simulated monsoon. Rain pelted the terrain with synthetic force, reducing visibility to a meter. Mud sucked at boots. Cloaking drones buzzed through the haze, flitting in and out of motion tracker range. Their sniper's energy rifle fizzled out 20 minutes in. Water exposure to the internal wiring. Frishka's optical HUD went haywire in the electromagnetic wash near a ridge. She tossed it entirely and reverted to iron sights. Elias's iron sights temporarily mounted on her borrowed M4 clone. At hour 2, a simulated mine went off near their forward scout. Elias got there first. The cadet, a thin Avenari, with translucent skin and no endoskeleton, was still conscious, writhing in the wet clay, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. "I can't move," the cadet gasped. "I think my limb joint." "Stop moving," Elias said, kneeling beside him and scanning the leg visually. There was no external bleeding, but the angle was wrong, and the tremor in the cadet's side indicated possible nerve compression. "No splint in the kit," Frishka said, rushing over. "We're not equipped for—" "I've got it." Elias tore the carrying strap from his launcher sling, pulled 2 carbon rods from his backpack frame, and snapped them to length. "Hold his torso, gently." He braced the limb, checked for circulation, and splinted it tight with makeshift clamps. It wasn't pretty, but it would prevent movement. "You'll make it," Elias said. "Stay here. Radio the med team. We'll mark your position with IR." He stood, shoulders soaked and legs caked with artificial mud. Frishka stared at the cadet's leg, then at Elias. "You've done that before." "3 times, Elias said. "Real ones." They moved on. By hour 4, Squad 4 had outpaced every other team. The reason wasn't firepower. It wasn't superior mobility or tactics. It was cohesion. They had fallback methods for every failure. When drones glitched, they switched to hand signals. When suits lost power, Elias guided them by compass and terrain association. And when every other team's energy weapons finally failed in the final electromagnetic surge short-circuiting in a gorgeous wave of cascading light, Squad 4 still had working rifles. One of them barked, M4, followed by another. Then a grenade launcher thumped twice in rhythm. The final target dummy, reinforced with active shielding, fell with a hole the size of a grapefruit in its chest. Simulation complete. The debrief was quiet. Instructor Yal'Veen didn't speak for a long moment. Then, Squad 4 met every objective and exceeded equipment reliability benchmarks across all categories. Elias stood off to the side. He hadn't expected applause. He didn't get it, but what he got instead was more meaningful. One by one, cadets came forward, not to shake his hand, to inspect the rifle, to ask questions, to copy his notes, to borrow his manuals. Even Grixxel stood by patiently, watching as a young cadet from the Uraz hive carefully traced the outline of a bolt carrier group and muttered to herself in her native clicking dialect. Frishka approached. "I modified the recoil compensation formula for my species. It works with your system now." "You planning on taking one home?" Elias asked. "If they let me." She paused. "You know your weapon. It isn't really just about the mechanics." "No," Elias said. "It's about trust. You trust the steel. The steel trusts you back." She smiled with her eyes. Grixxel lingered as the crowd thinned. He stepped forward slowly, holding something in his hands. "I've replicated your design using Zarnathi standard materials," he said. "Polymer receiver, adjustable gas block, modular grip. Weight is lower, tolerance is tighter." Elias took the prototype and looked it over. The shape was familiar, but the markings were different. "You made your own version?" "I improved it," Grixxel said, then hesitated. "Slightly." Elias chuckled. "Just don't forget where it came from." "I won't," Grixxel said. Elias handed the rifle back and nodded once. As the two turned toward the hallway, cadets were already discussing ballistic trajectories, powder mixes, cleaning schedules, and how to field strip without tools. Somewhere behind them, someone asked, "Can Earth make more of these?" Elias didn't turn. He just kept walking, boots clanking steadily on metal flooring, carrying with him the same weapon that had survived decades, wars, and now an entire galaxy's worth of skepticism. Primitive? Maybe. But sometimes, primitive still wins.